Welcome into another edition of the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley. Lucky to be joined by a special guest today, Jacob Rudner from Swamp247 as A&M in Florida get ready to square off on Saturday afternoon. Jacob, how's it going? Thanks very much for joining the show.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm doing well. I appreciate y'all having me on.
It feels like A&M and Florida both kind of sit in a must-win situation in terms of bowl hopes and all that this year. What's been the mood around Gainesville this week, heading into this week's matchup?
I think actually, Andrew, you'd be surprised to know that the mood around Gainesville, especially with the fan base, is pretty good right now. I think
Yeah,
Florida is starting to take steps towards next year in a way. Uh,
yeah.
Starting Jack linebacker Brenton Cox was dismissed from the team earlier this week. That was a big piece of news. I mean, Billy Napier letting go of a starter, but I think that was all kind of in hopes of resetting the culture a little bit around here. And I think fans are excited to see the progress in that direction.
That was going to be kind of my next question is how would you assess the job that he's done so far? Obviously, in your first year, there's going to be growing pains, culture things that you have to establish. Where do you feel like they kind of are in that process?
I think that they're doing about as good a job as expected, in my opinion. The record is about what I thought
Mhm.
it would look like. The recruiting class is roughly what I thought it would look like. I think that there have been some misses there. Like if you wanted to say that there have been negatives so far, I would say that maybe it's occurred on the recruiting trail, but even still, they have a class that ranks ninth in the country. So that's been good. And then I think that they've done a good job in terms of just doing what they can with what they have. This was not a very good team that they inherited. The culture was a mess. They're still kind of dealing with some of those issues that they did not start. And so I think that this offseason will provide a really good opportunity to kind of hit reset and build towards next year when those sort of things can really be evaluated.
Obviously, when you come into every year, you're kind of looking for players that you can build around and guys that maybe are pleasant surprises. Who are maybe some of those guys that have been pleasant surprises or kind of stepped up into that fold?
Keon Zipperer, the tight end, has been really good. He's Florida's fourth leading receiver. He leads tight ends on the team in receptions, about 180 yards on the season with a touchdown. I think that was a guy who had kind of developed a reputation around here that likes to drop the ball, misses easy opportunities, but has really kind of found his stride as a pass catcher, which has been pretty valuable for this team when he's used. And then I would say Justin Shorter as well, the wide receiver, also kind of a guy who had developed a reputation as somebody who was prone to bad drops, but this year has been really excellent. 471 yards, leads the team, two touchdowns, but he's questionable against Texas A&M.
Yeah. I know there was some injury news last night that I
Yeah.
believe you reported on. What where is Florida from an injury standpoint? Are there any guys that you're kind of keeping an eye on heading into Saturday?
So Shorter is questionable with a hamstring injury. It sounds like
Yeah.
he practiced minimally. Minimal was
Okay.
the description that Billy Napier gave. I would say that I would chalk him up to probably doubtful, just based off of
Okay.
what I've heard and the level of participation. Keon Zipper, who I just mentioned, is out. I
Okay.
don't know the exact details of it, but I know generally he has a knee injury that is not a 1 week recovery, so he'll be out for a bit. And other than that, Scooby Williams, a linebacker, is questionable. I think he could kind of go either way still, but that's really the big ones for this week.
Gotcha. And looking at this first year, obviously, and I mentioned the bowl eligibility. How important is it, do you think, for Florida to at least reach a bowl and be able to have those extra practices as they kind of look to head into that second year under Billy Napier?
So this is a take I actually caught a little bit of heat for from the
Yeah,
fan base, but I really don't think a bowl game is that important this year. I just don't.
yeah,
I don't see the value personally in holding extra practices with a team that won't look like this next year. Like the squad that's in Gainesville right now will not be in Gainesville the way it is by the springtime. It's going to look completely different. So, I mean, practicing with a bunch of guys that are going to be not a part of the program to me doesn't hold as much value. That being said, I do think that a bowl game has value for the fan base. They clearly care, to see Florida play an extra game, and that matters. And so, for that reason, obviously, and you want to win games, they should strive to make a bowl game. But I don't actually think it's that important in the grand scheme of things.
I saw I believe you wrote a story on this earlier this week about the transfer portal and Billy Napier kind of talking about it this off season. Do you expect Florida to be pretty active in the transfer portal as they now that they've had kind of a year to assess where things are?
No doubt. I think that this is going to be an extremely active offseason for Florida in the portal. We could even see Florida pursue a quarterback. I mean, Anthony Richardson is not a guarantee to return. I haven't heard either way what could happen, but a guy who is as talented as he is, even without, I think, the desired results, is still a really good-looking draft prospect, and so he can go either way. But really, they have to reload at so many different positions. Wide receiver needs help. Linebacker needs help. Defensive tackle has been a real position of weakness this year. So yeah, they should be aggressive.
You mentioned Anthony Richardson. What do you think makes him so tough to bring down outside of the pocket? Is it just kind of his elusiveness or feel for the game, or what do you think kind of makes him tough to bring down?
I think it's what you mentioned, plus the fact that he's 6'4" and
Yeah.
238 pounds. So I mean, he moves like a guy who's half his size, but you add the strength and the ability to run through contact. He's a dangerous runner for sure.
And in the passing game, what do they need to do to kind of have him be more effective in on that front? I think he's completing just over 55% of his passes.
Yeah.
Is it things that the receivers can do, or is it a combination of both, or what have you kind of seen on that front?
It's a combination. I think the largest area of inconsistency so far has been in Florida's short to medium game in its passing attack. Just far too inconsistent. Bad throws, bad routes. There have been drops in the short game. Florida really needs to improve in that regard because a lot of its progress as an offensive unit comes from this kind of quick dink and dunk style passing that they kind of pair with RPOs and a heavy run game. They run the ball a ton. So, they get more consistent there. The completion percentage will go up. I also believe that they should take off more shot plays. They
Yeah.
don't really do that a ton. And when they do it, they're very successful. So I think that the offense could use a blend of consistency, obviously, but also maybe a little bit more aggression, I think would be helpful.
And looking at this team, obviously they've had a tough ask on the road so far. They've got a couple coming up, but to go to Georgia and Tennessee is as their two road games. What do you feel like are kind of the keys going to Kyle Field this weekend, and what can they maybe learn from those two trips that they've taken so far?
I think it's just playing stronger defense needs to be the focus is blocking out the noise and really staying sharp on the keys and knowing where things are going to go and relying on the film study that they've done throughout the week. Defense has been Florida's weakness throughout this entire season. It's not really a secret. They've been awful on that side of the ball for the most part. They rank among the worst teams in the country in most major categories. They are the worst in third down defense. So if Florida can't keep pace and they let things get out of hand with Texas A&M's offense, it's going to be really tough for them to win this game. And I do think Florida has a good offense. They know how to score points, and they
Yeah.
can be dangerous. Again, though, it doesn't matter if you score a lot if you're giving up touchdowns consecutively. So it's going to come down to whether or not they can stop the Aggies.
No doubt, and A&M obviously has had some trouble with this too, but especially the run defense. I think Florida's allowing close to 200 yards per game on the ground. What have been some of the primary issues there? Has it been missed tackles or just failure to kind of hit fit run fits? What have been the issues there?
Those are probably two of the bigger problems. I think that they
Yeah.
get inconsistent in the run fits a little bit. I would also throw into the hat that fatigue has been an issue. Javon
Yeah.
Dexter, who went into the season, I mean, you know this, a highly rated guy
Yeah.
within the conference. People thought very highly of him. He's playing more snaps per game than any defensive tackle in Power Five football. So he is exhausted by the time the game is over. The guy plays the equivalent of two
Yeah.
full games relative to the average SEC defensive tackle every game. So, I mean, it's hard to stop the run when you're just on the field a ton. These guys are gassed. And I think that really, if there was more depth at their position, they'd actually just see a statistical, they'd be improved for sure, I think.
But is that an issue that they knew kind of coming into the year depth wise, or is
Yeah.
injuries kind of hit that? Yeah. Uh, and looking at a guy like Montrell Johnson, obviously Florida's got their a running game of their own. What has made Montrell Johnson effective outside of obviously came with Billy Napier, but what's made him effective in the Florida run game?
He's really good through contact. I think that he doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to rely on shiftiness and missing tackles and all those things. I think that this is a guy who's perfectly comfortable just rolling through contact, and it's allowed him to pick up extra yardage. He's also really smart when he gets outside the tackles. He's a smart, patient runner. There's a maturity to the way that he attacks defenses, and that kind of comes with you mentioned it, the familiarity with Napier, but also he played a ton as a freshman, so he's already pretty experienced and has a lot of a lot of knowledge under his belt.
Has it been kind of a 1-2 punch with Trevor Etienne, or how does that kind of break out? Do they kind of alternate series on that front?
It's pretty evenly split. They're relatively close to each other in terms of total carries this season, and Etienne I think is the shiftier complement to Johnson's more aggressive style of running. So they work nicely together, and I would say that it's reasonably even in terms of how they split it.
Obviously, Ole Miss racked up close to 400 yards on the ground last week on this A&M defense. Is there anything that they've kind of I know they probably won't say too much, but do you think there are things that they kind of learned from that game and might look to attack as well this week? Or
I would be shocked if Florida does not rely heavily on its run game, like more than we've even seen.
Mhm.
And it's already a pretty uneven split. Uh, Clearly this A&M defense struggles against the run. It was made against Ole Miss. It was obvious what the issues were, and Florida structures similarly with its two running backs, and they have a good offensive line on the ground. I think that the emphasis is just going to be to try and chip away, via the run, and see what kind of shot plays through the air can kind of be generated off of that, if that makes sense.
no doubt. And in the secondary, obviously, a guy like Evan Stewart has really emerged as the year has gone along. What do you think they might try to do to slow him down? Do you see them kind of rolling more coverage over to him, or how do you think they might attack him?
I'm going to be completely honest with you, Andrew. I have no clue what they're going to do.
Mm,
We have
yeah,
not seen a whole lot of variety
yeah,
out of Florida's defensive secondary so far this season, which kind of leads me to my point. It's hard
yeah.
to kind of calculate what adjustments they might make to account for him because they haven't really made a ton of adjustments for other key players that have been noticeable.
No
It's
doubt.
part of the reason they've gotten shredded on that side of the ball. So I'm interested as much as you are, I think, in how they're going to try and slow him down.
Love the honesty. That's of course it's one of those going to be one of those fascinating questions and how they kind of adjust him if they do adjust him. Jacob, thanks so much for hopping on here to give a look behind the Gators and it should be a good one this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And have a good one, everybody. We'll see you guys next week to break down this game against the Gators and look ahead to a matchup with Auburn as well. Take care, everyone.